Do you agree with Dallin
anything
Chokes that laws
to
permitting abortion are a great evil?
I haven't said a word in contradiction to that. Abortion is a great evil in most circumstances. Yeah.
No. Hold on. Many laws permit or even promote abortion. No ellipses, but to us, this is a great evil.
Yes, abortion is a great evil. Yeah, I promoting abortion.
Jim, the law is... The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has consistently decried abortion, citing the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill, nor do anything like unto it." The Democratic Party, meanwhile, strongly advocates for the right to abortion, framing it as women's health care and a private medical decision. And this isn't just rhetoric from them. Just this week, Massachusetts Democrats passed a law removing statutory restrictions on abortions in the third trimester. The room full of women cheering as the bill was signed was one of the most disturbing political videos I have seen this year. Clearly, if Latter-day Saints support the Democrat Party, they must do so in spite of its position on abortion, not because of it. Right? Well, not according to Jim Bennett. Jim and I sat down with Rylan from the Ether's Elephant YouTube channel recently to hash out our approaches to abortion and politics, and things got spicy, as you might expect. For the sake of transparency, you should know that I've cut about 25 minutes from this conversation because it kind of veered into tangents on other topics, so I've cut it down but preserved the arguments made by each side. So with that, here is our conversation.
In the first place I wanted to start, just to make sure we're all on the same page, is just kind of rehashing the church's stance on abortion, because they do have some official words. And obviously there's been some general conference talks and such that have also talked about it. But specifically, I pulled it up for us, so we don't have to do it. 38.6.1. Says that members must not submit to, perform, arrange for, pay for, consent to, or encourage an abortion. The only possible exceptions are when, and it lists 3. Number 1, pregnancy resulted from rape or incest. A competent, emphasis on competent, physician determines that the life or health of the mother is in serious jeopardy. And 3, a competent, another competent physician determines that the fetus has severe severe defects that will not allow the baby to survive beyond birth. So not just birth defects, but like defects that are going to cost the baby's life beyond birth. So I wanted to start off asking both of you. We'll, I guess, start with Jim and then go to you, Luke. What are your thoughts on the church's stance? Does it align with what you believe? And tell me what you think so far.
You're starting with me?
Who would you like to go
sorry,
first?
I said Jim, just because he's big on my screen.
So I'm big on the screen.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I fully support 100% the church's position on this. I don't think that a lot of church members recognize just how controversial that position is with the rest of the world, and particularly with the Republican Party. Very often, when you go to General Conference, you guys ever been to General Conference when you've had the street protesters out front?
Oh, yeah. There's always that one guy dressed as a devil.
Yeah.
Always look out for him, like, where's the devil guy?
More and more, and now I would say even a majority of the protesters are anti-abortion protesters. There was one guy that came with a bunch of dirty Tampax. And I just thought, where did you get these and why are you brandishing them in public? But the message is that the church allowing for exceptions in cases of rape and incest, exceptions not just to save the life of the mother, but to preserve the health of the mother, which is significant. I don't know if the severe birth defects is nearly as controversial as those other two. But those are not exceptions that can be found in most legislation, state legislation that has been passed since Roe versus Wade was overturned. And all of the legislation have exceptions to save the life of the mother. But the difficulty with those is that the mother has to wait until she's at death's door before they're willing to perform an abortion. You saw this in Texas in a couple of different cases. And so that became a challenge, and that's a challenge going forward. So I think that it seems to be very, the vast majority, we've got people walking in and out, the vast majority of members of the church believe that the Republican Party, when I, as a disaffected Republican, I mean, I made my living in Republican politics for a number of years, but as a disaffected Republican, when I try to make the case that people shouldn't vote Republican, and they always sort of back into a corner where they say, okay, yeah, they'll even concede Donald Trump is the worst thing in the world, but I can't vote for a Democrat, I can't vote for anybody but a Republican because of abortion. And there are a number of things, we're going to get into this, I think, a little later, because I'm going to make us get into this, but I just, in terms of outlining that position, which I fully agree with, and I want it on record that I think abortion in almost every instance is a grave sin. I want less abortion. I would love to see abortion go away entirely. I think Republicans, and we'll talk about this, but I don't think Republican policies are actually doing that and are actually making the problem worse. But when anybody sort of pushes back and says, I have to vote for a Republican because the Republican policies reflect the position of the church, the reality is they don't. And for all of those exceptions, you have to have abortion laws that allow for those abortions. And currently, most Republican state laws do not. So that's my opening salvo.
All right. Well, let's go to Luke. Just kind of get your thoughts on the stance of the church. Is that something that aligns with how you think about abortion for you, Luke? And what are your thoughts on the church's statement or stance there from the handbook?
Yeah, this aligns with my view as well. But I would add that you look before those exceptions, which is kind of the outline, the reason why abortion is opposed, and it's because of the command, thou shalt not kill, nor do anything like unto it, from Doctrine and Covenants 59:6, although, of course, that's found in any list of the 10 commandments. And then it says members must not submit to, perform, or pay. So the reasoning why is given, and then after the exceptions, I think a lot of people skip this. You were guilty of this too.
Yes, it's pretty long, actually, so I just took some of the middle, but go ahead.
It says, even in these circumstances, members should approach the decision with prayerful decision. And the previous handbook was even a little more forceful in that the exceptions doesn't mean, oh, rape, okay, go get one. Come on, let's go. No, that is absolutely not the church's position. If I were to guess, if I were to put a bet down on within the realm of the exceptions, which already are in the single digit or even 0.0 something percent of abortions, even in those exceptions, my gut feeling is that even then about 80% shouldn't happen. That even if you fall in the exception category, chances are abortion is not going to be the route to go down. And so I just have to emphasize, this is not carte blanche. It is not have at it when you get to those exceptions. Also, when it comes to policy, nowhere in here does it say that it is more important to support the exceptions than it is to try to get rid of the abortions when it comes to laws. Members just seem to make this assumption that because of the amount of space that it's taking in the policy, that the exceptions are what the church teaches rather than the don't kill part of the abortion stance that the church teaches. And so just cards on the table, not bearing the lead. If I had the option, if it was you, Luke, you could sign into law, your abortion czar for the United States right now. You can sign into a law, abortion with no abortion, no exceptions, except for, as Jim mentioned, like actively dying moms that are already like a medical thing. They're not actually just killing the baby. They are delivering the baby as a life-saving mechanism for the mother. It's like a different category entirely. Or basically before 12 weeks, abortion is fine. After that, only a couple of exceptions, and then third trimester, a few more. But essentially abortion till birth. If those are my two options, I would choose ban abortions, all of them, even the exceptions. I would choose that all day, any day. It reminds me of the Norm Macdonald joke about who is the black comedian who was convicted. He was drugging the woman and stuff. And somebody was
Cosby.
talking to him.
Yeah.
Bill Cosby. And the joke is they said, oh, you know what was so terrible about the Bill Cosby situation was the hypocrisy. And Norm says, well, I thought it was the raping, actually. That's what it's like with the abortion. It's whenever people talk about, oh, isn't it terrible that the exceptions aren't being respected? The church's specific positions on the exceptions aren't being written into these laws. I kind of go, I do the Norm Macdonald thing. Like, actually, the problem I have is with all the baby killing. Like, that's where my concern is facing. And then whether the exceptions are included or not is a concern. I mean, ideally, I would include them to an extent if I was abortion czar. But if I had those choices, I wouldn't even think about it. Like, save the babies over these very few exceptions that might work in a couple of cases. And yeah, right. So that's my position.
And thank you for pointing out that, yes, I did. I took a shorter version of what's actually in 38.6.1 on abortion because, like I said, it is pretty long. But yeah, it has that scripture. So everything you said is accurate from what I was reading earlier. So before we go over back to you, Jim, I mean, you already started talking about this, and we've already kind of gotten into the politics and how this plays into it a little bit, because I do want to get into, okay, this is kind of where the church has their stance. I think we're pretty clear on that. Now, how does that play into how you should vote? Now, I did some homework. I went and looked up the official party platforms for the Republican Democratic Party in the United States. And these were last updated in 2024 for the federal election for the presidency and others. And they have like giant booklets that explain all their stances. Okay, so I went and found where it talks about abortion. So to summarize, the Republican platform 2024, page 20, says that we proudly stand for families and life. We believe that the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States guarantees that no person can be denied life or liberty without due process, and that the states are, therefore, free to pass laws protecting those rights. After 51 years, because of us, that power has been given to the states and to a vote of the people. We will oppose late-term abortion while supporting mothers and policies that advance prenatal care, access to birth control, and IVF. Okay, that's the Republicans. Which is interesting because it has kind of softened up in recent years. You know, you see them saying we oppose late-term abortions as opposed to just saying they oppose abortions. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party in 2024, page 50, says this: with the Democratic Congress, we will pass national legislation to make Roe the law of the land. That's referring to Roe v. Wade. We will strengthen access to contraception so every woman who needs it is able to get it and afford it. We will protect a woman's right to access IVF. We will repeal the Hyde Amendment, which kind of defunds some of this abortion clinic stuff, from what I understand. And in his second term, President Biden, that didn't age super well, will continue to support access to FDA-approved medication abortion, appoint leaders to the FDA who respect science, and appoint judges who uphold fundamental freedoms. So in a lot of ways, they're kind of more vague in some sense than I think some people think. And obviously, the individual candidates can take stronger stances when they're asked directly about it. So the question we have at hand here, Jim, is which party platform in the United States best aligns with the church's stance and the church's moral claims that they make about abortion? What do you think?
At the risk of plagiarizing Brad Wilcox, maybe we're asking the wrong question. And so I want to ask what I think is the right question. Is it more important to you to prevent abortion or to make abortion illegal? Because they are not the same thing. And that's where I think this discussion has gone off the rails, largely because, largely with members of the church. Because, as you listen to those platforms, I was actually surprised by the emphasis on contraception in the Democratic platform, and because I'm going to talk about that going forward. But the reality is, when you start talking about abortion and you start talking about, well, which one does the church support? I would think that the church would support preventing abortion and making abortion illegal. We have over 40 years of data that shows that not only does it not work, but it increases the abortion rate significantly. And the data we have on this comes from the Mexico City policy. Are both of you familiar with that, or either of you familiar with that? Rylan, you know what the Mexico City policy is?
I think you and I have talked about it before, but you have to remind me.
Okay, so sometimes it's called the global gag rule. It was passed in Mexico City. It doesn't really have anything to do with Mexico City. But under the Reagan administration, over 40 years ago, they passed a rule that says any NGO that receives any sort of support from the federal government is not only barred from performing abortion, they are barred from mentioning abortion as an option. They are not even allowed to mention that abortion exists. And this was first put into place by the Reagan administration. It was kept through the first Bush administration, the George H.W. Bush administration. It was reversed by Bill Clinton, and it was then again reversed by George W. Bush, and then it was reversed again by, every Democrat since Reagan has repealed it. Every Republican since Reagan has reinstated it, including President Trump. So there have been long-term studies as to what this has done and what it means. And what it has done is increase the abortion rate in all of the areas in which the policy is in effect by 40%. And I looked at that because when I became a Republican heretic, everybody was saying, well, Jim, you've got to stay Republican because of the abortion issue, because abortion is so important. And I started diving into this and did not realize that the unintended consequence of this policy was an increase in abortion, because when you make abortion illegal, it's a rather blunt instrument that damages a whole lot of women's health care options, most notably contraception. And what I have come to realize is that you don't eliminate abortion by making it illegal. You eliminate abortion by making it unnecessary. And the way you make abortion unnecessary is through contraception and through education. And when you criminalize abortion, there is a ripple effect that ends up damaging both of those efforts in such a way that unintended pregnancies increase, and access to contraception decreases, and the result is more abortion. Now, if you want to say, okay, well, that's only true with this policy, we now have hard data The abortion rate since the overturn of Roe versus Wade in the United States has spiked by 11%. The number of abortions now being done in this country are 11% more in terms of the abortion rate than prior to Roe versus Wade being overturned. And what people don't recognize is that the abortion rate from 1972, when Roe was decided, the abortion rate has plummeted for every decade since. It ticked up a little bit in the first Trump administration, even before Roe versus Wade was overturned. But it's been on a downward plummet to the point where when Roe was overturned, the abortion rate was lower. The number of abortions, we had a larger population. So per capita, we're talking, the percentage, the number of women per 100,000 had declined to a rate lower than it was prior to Roe versus Wade. So the thing, when people start railing on me that, oh, geez, you're a baby killer and you this, that, and the other, I just say, well, so are we just going to ignore the fact that these policies have led to more abortion? Because it becomes very clear the longer you have this as a political conversation, the more you discover that it is far more important to many people. I don't know if this applies to either one of you, and I don't want to prejudge you on this, but in my political conversations on abortion, it becomes very clear that to Republicans, the most important thing is criminalization, regardless of whether or not it's effective and whether or not it actually drives up the abortion rate. And there are international studies that show this. Ireland passed a very severe abortion ban that they since had to repeal because it did not drive down abortions, and abortions, in fact, went up over there, too. This is not, I think, being dealt with in a way that focuses on what the actual problem is. The actual problem is that abortion is like unto murder, as Luke has pointed out. And so we ought to make sure that we prevent as much of it as humanly possible. And if criminalization is not doing that, then I don't feel any obligation to vote for the party that puts criminalization over prevention. And indeed, I feel a very strong, compulsion to vote for the party that actually reduces abortion. So that is my second salvo, I guess.
Oh, sorry. I'm on mute.
You want me to go, or do you
I was
have
on mute. I
something?
said, yeah, nice. Luke, you're up. Is what I was trying to say, but sorry, I was on mute.
Okay, but I mean, and that's all fine and well, and you can have discussions about that. You are veering from the church's position on this, or what they've said about this, when you're saying that, and it's this bizarre argument. Like, imagine abortion being next to murder. Imagine somebody trying to make the argument that we shouldn't criminalize murder because the murder rates don't actually change after you criminalize it. Everybody would be like, what are you talking about? Of course murder should be illegal. Almost in a way, and Jim was saying this, and I'm actually going to partly embrace the position he said he disliked and was wondering if we hold. To an extent, I think that abortion should be made illegal for the sake of making it illegal, and not because it's some optimized outcome of reducing abortions through policy. The idea that laws are going to fix a moral rot in society is kind of the whole problem, and the whole liberal leftist approach to government that I reject in the first place. However, what the laws are there for is not to craft the specific policies and give the sanctions and free the correct amount of free stuff and the right education. It is to protect life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That is the role of the government, is to stop people from doing bad things to each other through legislation, mostly. And so making abortion illegal is a moral stance. I am in favor of legislating morality because every legislation is a representation of the morality of those people. The laws against killing people are a representation or a legal enactment of the morality of every human life has value. Regardless of if you think it does or not, strong don't get to prey on the weak, don't kill each other. So abortion, that is the role of the government. If we're talking about the government, the role of the government is to set those protections in place. Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness is to legislate morality in the general sense. And so I don't, that argument of we have to optimize the outcomes and the legislation, I reject that. The government's job is to protect life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Abortion needs to be illegal because abortion is morally wrong. Abortion is harming another person. And that is why the government needs to recognize that in its laws. It is for us to be a moral people, like John Adams was saying, that the Constitution has to govern, we need to recognize the value of human life in our laws. It's not an outcome, a data type of thing, although that's important, but it's more of a spiritual and a cultural problem that we're having here. And I think the leaders of the church are more on my side. I'm not going to say that they have my exact position, but I'm not aware, maybe Jim can give me one if there's one out there. I'm not aware of church leaders lamenting the government's incorrect approach to sex education or to contraception access when it comes to abortion. However, they have multiple times recently talked about the legal aspect of this. So Dallin H. Oaks, current prophet, knows a thing or two about the law, having done it professionally at a very high level. In 2012, so recently, says, quote, "Many laws permit or even promote abortion, but to us this is a great evil." So there not being a law banning abortion is a great evil. And I completely agree with him on that. I'd be interested to hear what Jim says about that. Russell M. Nelson, 2008. "Ironically, civilized societies that have generally placed safeguards on human life, like I believe government is there to do, have now passed laws that sanction this practice." So obviously laws sanctioning, or in the inverse, laws not banning abortion. It's ironic to Russell Nelson. I think he's underselling it a little bit, because right before this in the quote, he calls it a war on the unborn. And then on the church's website, post-Dobbs, after the Dobbs decision, "As states work to enact laws related to abortion, church members may appropriately choose to participate in efforts to get sex education, get contraceptive care, to protect life and preserve religious liberty." And so, morally, we're talking as the moral position of the country, and we need to be a moral people if we're going to have any hope of governing ourselves. Abortion needs to be illegal. And then conversations about how to decrease it through sociological pull up and down with the levers of the money and all that stuff, that's a secondary thing, in my opinion, to that.
Yeah, Jim, any follow up there real quick?
Sure. I want to begin where you began, Luke, with the idea that, well, geez, we would never say that we would make murder legal just because it would reduce the murder rate. And you're right, because making murder legal would not reduce the murder rate. There have been plenty.
But what if it would?
Well, what if my aunt were my uncle? It doesn't. What if the moon were the sun? The reality is we've got a circumstance where we know that laws against murder deter murder. And we understand that well, anyway, the point being that that's a false analogy because you're trying to make an analogy to a hypothetical that just isn't true. The reality is, you confirmed essentially what I'm saying when I say, are you more interested in preventing abortion or are you more interested in making abortion illegal? You made it very clear you're more interested in making abortion illegal.
A false dichotomy.
Am I getting that wrong? Am I straw manning you there?
I would call it a false dichotomy. I've donated to women's resource centers, so that's one thing I do. And then politically, when it comes to elected leaders, their job is to legislate morality, is to protect life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. You do that by making things that harm life illegal. And so when I'm electing leaders, that's what I'm looking for. And then in my personal life,
harm life. That's the thing. I mean, everything that you read to me about the church's stance, I just pulled up Neil L. Anderson's 2025 talk on abortion, where he outlines all of the exceptions, or the possible exceptions, talks about one case where the woman thought that maybe they were going to have an abortion and chose not to. There is absolutely nothing political in this talk. There's absolutely no endorsement of or call for any sort of partisan political action with regard to abortion. The church's role and the church's policy is not to legislate morality, it's to declare morality, which they do very clearly and very effectively in a way that offends much of the Christian world. Again, I point to the protesters outside the conference center who think listing any of those exceptions is entirely unacceptable. I mean, you don't have exceptions to murder. That kind of a comparison just doesn't work.
You do have exceptions to killing
but
another
person.
But
that's not murder. That would be like saying that a miscarriage is the same thing as an abortion.
I didn't say that abortion was murder.
Involuntary manslaughter is not murder. Murder is a crime that requires intent, that requires the desire to kill somebody. Yes. We have different labels for different things that happen. We're not just talking about killing somebody. We're talking about a specific crime. You have equated abortion with murder. And so therefore, you're saying that essentially any kind of killing of a...
I did not equate it with murder, if I can be very clear. Like I said...
You didn't use the phrase baby
and pointed
killing?
out, and you pointed out, actually. Yeah, killing is different than murder. If you're in the battlefield, if you're, the machine gun protecting the country from a land invasion, you mow down 50 people. You did not murder 50 people, but you did kill 50 people.
So abortion is like killing somebody on a battlefield?
There's a distinction here.
I mean, where are you putting that?
No. Okay. No. I'm saying, all I did was read the church statement and read the rationale behind it. Human life shouldn't be killed. That's why abortion is wrong. Okay. Innocent human life.
We are not in disagreement on any of that. That's the thing that drives me nuts.
I'm just confused why you said that murder is intent and then said that I had just said that abortion was murder.
Well, you began by saying thou shalt not kill or do anything like unto it. And the way you keep framing this and the way you keep talking about this, I am more than happy to accommodate wherever you want to put abortion on this spectrum of the taking of human life. But in the way you describe it, in the way you describe the sort of moral evil, that it's even more important to pass a law that would actually increase abortion because it's important to get on the record that we are so morally opposed to abortion that law is worth the price of 40% more abortions overseas, which strikes me as absolutely ridiculous.
Not what I said.
You cannot separate the consequences of the law from the intent of the law and claim you hold some kind of moral high ground by taking this bold stance against abortion that actually increases abortion. And this isn't a hypothetical. This is something we have voluminous and decades of data that demonstrates that this is the case. So it just doesn't make any sense to me as you come at me and say, well, I'm standing with the church because I'm standing for life. And even if that means that 40% more abortions happen, I'm the one standing for life. You're not. You're not. You're the one standing for 40% more abortions so that you can make a ceremonial statement that makes you feel good about yourself, but results in more, if you're going to call it baby killing, more baby killing.
Well, not just what I call it, but what the church calls it. So would you disagree with Dallin H. Oaks, 2012? Do you agree or disagree with Dallin H. Oaks? Many laws permit or even promote abortion, but to us, this is a great evil.
I absolutely agree with that.
Do you agree with Dallin H. Oaks that laws permitting abortion are a great evil?
I haven't said a word in contradiction to that. Abortion is a great evil in most circumstances. Yeah.
No. Hold on. Many laws permit or even promote abortion. No ellipses. But to us, this is a great evil.
Yes, abortion is a great evil. Yeah, promoting abortion.
Jim, the laws. He's talking about the laws
Luke, if you want to read that legalistically, which laws that are passed are actually promoting abortion? Which laws actually result in 40% more abortions than other laws?
Well, you skipped the permit part. Many laws that permit or even promote abortion, but to us is a great. So you agree with the promote part? Got it. I'm wondering if you agree with the permit part. Is it a great evil to have laws that permit abortion per Dallin H. Oaks?
I read that statement as abortion is a great evil and we should not permit it as members of the church and we should not promote it. Whether or not laws permit
Why is he talking about laws
to whether or not members of the church permit it. I mean, I do not see that as the kind of advocacy that you see it, and it's bizarre to me that you can just sort of blithely ignore the promotion of abortion that comes with the passage of the kinds of laws that you advocate and say, well, that's not a big deal because I really don't like abortion. I mean, I don't care if you like it or if you hate it. If you're promoting it by passing laws that result in more of it, 40% more of it, then I think that is a great evil. And I think I'm the one that is in alignment with Dallin Oaks on that.
Let me just throw in something real quick. This might be a little bit of a grenade. Mm-hmm. I don't know. But I remember, Jim, last time we were talking about abortion, you did bring up this Mexico City policy, which, as I understand it, is basically foreign aid and its ability to be used for abortion. And Republicans basically say, hey, this money cannot be used for abortions. And Democrats say, yeah, you can use it for abortion or whatever you want. Now, I think to your point, and I like the idea of being practical about things, you know, in application, what actually happens. That's where differences make. So I like that. But I did do a little bit of reading on this because I wanted to, you know, keep up with some of these things that you said. And so I think we can agree that Mexico City policy, that particular policy, probably doesn't help with abortions. But however, when we take kind of a look in the United States, this idea that like you elect Republicans and suddenly abortion rates go up, I don't think that seems to be the case. So you pointed out already that in 2017 to 2020, under Donald J. Trump, the abortion rate did tick up a little bit. But that's kind of an anomaly. Like you see, you don't really see a pattern of like when someone's in office.
Because I don't think it had anything to do with what the Trump administration had done. I don't want to cut you off, and I'll let you continue this, but I do want to point out that prior to the overturning of Roe versus Wade, no Republican or Democrat did a damn thing that had any impact on the abortion rate. So yes, you're absolutely right. Since Roe versus Wade,
I was going to say, it comes to local law, other factors. Technology has changed over time. Like getting abortions in some ways is actually easier today, and that actually impacts it. But I do think kind of going back to some of the stuff Luke's saying, the bigger issue here is like local laws do matter for sure. I think that does impact it. Like when you're looking at the global abortion rates in the United States, local laws matter more than whoever's president. But I do think, kind of to what Luke's talking about, the culture is probably what matters more than anything. Like, what do people believe is right and wrong? How does this get back to morality?
Well, and if I could jump in here, it's like it's gone up by 11%, and that's because abortion is harder to get. Okay, but it's not a single factor thing. Maybe it's gone up because almost the entire left has been lockstep in fear-mongering about it. I remember Hakeem Jeffries in his giant speech about the big, beautiful bill spent a chunk of his time kind of like glorying in the beauty of, it's all euphemisms. It's the woman's right to choose and her personal medical decisions and all this kind of stuff to talk about elective abortion. And the View, almost all Democrat Congress people and stuff, constant fear-mongering on the news, the anchors, on the House floor, on the talk shows, on the podcasts. And so if you're living in that environment of, oh my gosh, they're trying to stop you from making medical decisions and all that stuff, well, now that's creating the impetus, the drive to hurry and go do it. I don't want to wait till later because they're trying to take away my medical decisions. I better go do it right now. For example, if Jim doesn't like
were you going to bring
hypotheticals.
up murder
I guess
again?
I'll skip that and just no, it actually wasn't going to be murder.
Well, yeah, let's hear it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so point being, so it's like, so you attribute it to the law, and so the Republicans that passed this law made it go up. Maybe it was all the leftists, all the Democrats fear-mongering to everybody that, oh my gosh, this is so important that you should do this, and now you're not going to be able to do this. And so the people go, oh my gosh, better go do it before before something bad happens. And then they go and do it, and the rate goes up. Could that possibly have influenced this whatsoever? It's so bizarre that like the party who's saying that this thing is bad is causing it to go up, whereas the party who's saying it's super important that you be able to do this thing are the ones that is making it go down. Is it possible that the party who is going on all the talk show networks, getting into people's feeds and into their ears, riling them up about this as well? I mean, if we're going to talk about riling up your base around an issue you're not going to do anything about, the left and the Democrats as well, for sure, on abortion, in favor of it. And could that possibly influence people? Could it possibly? I mean, to act like the law was the only thing that could have possibly explained why it went up is it's just silly to me. It's kind of ridiculous. I've had my eyes open the past 4 years. I've seen this stuff. I know what the messaging has been.
The left has only been pushing abortion for the past 4 years. Prior to that, they were very temperate in how they discussed abortion, and there was no fear-mongering whatsoever on either side. The reality is,
but Dobbs changed, and so of course the messaging becomes more imminent and relevant.
But the only
reason
it becomes more imminent and relevant is because action is possible. I was saying that sarcastically to point out that there's no question that the heated rhetoric from the left is astonishing and over the top. It has been for 50 years. If anything, it's probably more temperate now than it was prior to the repeal of Roe versus Wade, because, again, for the same reason that Republicans were able to rail on abortion and the evils of abortion, knowing there would be no consequence and no accountability for anything they said. Democrats, they're politicians too, and I mean the kind of rhetoric. I mean, when you say your eyes have been open for the past 4 years, I've been voting since 1992 in presidential elections, and my eyes have been open for the past 40 years, 44 years. The reality is, I guess, is that 40? whatever. I don't know how many years that is. That's 34 years.
34.
Anyway, the point being, it's amazing to me how many people just sort of wake up and think that this sort of started the minute they became politically aware. And it's the reason why the answer to your question, could it be because of this? The answer is no, is because prior to the repeal of Roe versus Wade, the rhetoric was the same, but the option to criminalize abortion was not present. So the only thing that has changed is the criminalization of abortion. And when you look at 40 years of data where the abortion rate, despite the one little statistical blip, the abortion rate plummeted for 40 years straight and then spikes by 11%, to say, well, that's because of the heated rhetoric. That's nonsense. That's absurd. The rhetoric is just as hot as it has always been. The only thing that has changed is now it is legal to make abortion illegal. And that change, and to say that people are like,
think
oh, now I really
me.
want an abortion. That doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, I think you
population that is
misunderstood.
seeking an abortion changes every 9 months, and many of them age out of getting abortions. A lot of abortion advocates, all of the abortion advocates who advocated for Roe versus Wade at the time are no longer capable of having abortions. What has changed is that when you criminalize abortion, just as in the case of the Mexico City policy, you're using a blunt tool to smash through women's health care, and contraception becomes more difficult to come by. And education programs that are tied into abortion, for instance, Planned Parenthood gets all kinds of flack, and rightfully so, for performing abortions. And they always point out, well, abortions constitute this small percentage of what we do. What we do is education. What we do is contraception. What we do is all this. And they're right. They do all those things. And then when you criminalize abortion and you use this bulldozer to come in and just say you can't get abortions for any reason whatsoever, even the reasons the church says could be possible reasons to get an abortion. And then all of a sudden, unwanted pregnancies go up because women now have less access to contraception. Education programs are threatened and are no longer in use. And a lot of these different guys are now gearing up to try to defend and deal with a problem they didn't have to worry about prior to Roe's repeal. To say that the spike has anything to do with anything else is really kind of absurd on its face.
Yeah, so for example, the Daily Wire, this is not a hypothetical or real thing, is, of course, always preaching against the left, railing against the left. And after Donald Trump gets elected, their subscribers drop by about a third. On the flip side, when Donald Trump gets elected, CNN's ratings go up by, let's say, approximately the same amount. The rhetoric didn't change. The political reality that people are living in changed, and so behavior changed because now the rhetoric is more imminent, it's pertaining to something more relevant. And so you were trying to say, and I wasn't saying my eyes have been open for the past 4 years, I wasn't saying by that I have no idea what was going on with abortion before that. No, I'm saying I am aware how the new political situation, just like when a new president comes in and the ratings change a lot on the different partisan platforms, the new law comes in, and now that rhetoric has more force behind it. People are getting behind it more, even though the rhetoric is the same.
Right. But to blame the rhetoric, then
that change has to be but you're the one saying, no, the people who are saying it's bad and outline it are causing it to go up.
No, it has nothing to do with their rhetoric.
Meanwhile, over here, it's silly to say that the people that say it's fine to do are the ones that are actually causing it to go down. I feel like I'm living kind of in crazy world when you're making that argument.
You misunderstood me if I haven't made this clear. I am not blaming heated Republican rhetoric for any increase in abortion. Not for any of it. In fact, I think, if anything, Republican rhetoric has severely diminished as politicians on the Republican side now face a reality of, I'm going to be held accountable for my rhetoric on abortion in a way that I wasn't before. Republicans have really tempered their anti-abortion heated. The Republicans are not nearly as over the top as they used to be, and the left is much more hysterical than they used to be. It has nothing to do with rhetoric as far as I'm concerned. It has to do with the legal framework, because that is really the only thing that changed. I am not blaming speeches about abortion for the increase in abortion rates. I'm blaming the damage to the things that make abortion unnecessary for the increase in abortion rates, and those would not be happening no matter what the rhetoric was, unless Roe v. Wade was overturned and abortion was criminalized in a number of states.
So I kind of wanted to get some ending thoughts on this last topic, which is, how much should members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints consider and weigh abortion when it comes to voting? And we're specifically talking about in the United States. And why is that? So I think, we all agree this is a profound moral question. We all agree with the church's stance. We've talked about the nuances there. We talked about where, voting comes into place, and law and practicality and morality and culture. But when we go to vote, I would imagine that morality, I don't imagine, morality does come into play. Even if people pretend like it doesn't, right? When you do shoulds or should nots, those are questions of morality. And so we weigh moral questions when we go into the poll to vote, or into the voting booth. But where do you think abortion ranks? Where does it rank for you guys individually? And we'll start with Luke, then we'll go to Jim. Where does it rank for you, and where do you think it should rank for Latter-day Saints when it comes to helping them weigh their decision on who to vote for or what policies to vote for?
Okay. Yeah, so as I kind of explained before, I don't see the role of government as engineering society salvation through legislation. If we should give the government all the levers of power and pocketbook and different taxes and subsidies to optimize and kind of get us as close to utopia as they can, and just give them all the power to do that. I as a conservative, see the government's role as much more limited. And so I'm not looking for, salvation, moral salvation from abortion in government, in elected leaders, in the policies that they enact. They play a role, and as far as I'm concerned, their role is to make things that involve people hurting other people illegal. And then it is the role of the citizens to talk about, and this is why I have written in the Cougar Chronicle about this. Abortion was my chosen topic when we got to choose for their printed edition what to do, to educate people about it. It wasn't about outline abortion necessarily. It was discussing how we can be pro-life with those exceptions. So that kind of education, we need to do that. We need to donate our own resources to helping women, as Jim Bennett has pointed out. We shouldn't be looking to the government to do this for us. It is our job to be Christians, not to vote for people to take our money and do Christian things with it, in my opinion. At the same time, I do think that abortion is a key issue because it acts as kind of a moral litmus test. Much has been made, and I share some of these concerns about how morally horrible Donald Trump is. You can't vote for him, even if he had good policies and did these great things, because he has done these things in his life, because he's not repentant for this, because he's still doing that. You just can't vote for him. And I say, sure, yes, I agree. The grab them by the P word comment was not about a policy he wanted to make. Democrats and leftists making arguments in favor of abortion are morally reprehensible things to believe and to say and to advocate for, and there's policy behind that. And so I would say you should, if you're looking at the moral character of the candidates, and this is once again The church has encouraged us to do this. It's one of the few guidelines that they give us for looking for candidates. A candidate who is almost advocating for killing, not murder, but killing of the unborn, I think is deeply serious. And I would have a very difficult time voting for them, even if I thought their other policies were good, just as I would have a very difficult time voting for somebody who espoused all the tenets of racism or of white supremacy. I would have a very difficult time voting for them, even if somebody could somehow convince me that their policies were actually going to decrease white supremacy. I'd be like, yeah, but they're still saying it's awesome on national TV. Like I can't do it. And so that's my approach to politicians. And I think that it would be wise for members to weigh it in a similar way when they're looking at this.
All right, Jim.
All right. Well, again, we have a weird straw man there with the white supremacy thing, because you throw out this hypothetical that I would never vote for a white supremacist even if their policies reduced white supremacy. There's absolutely no indication that any white supremacist's policies reduce white supremacy. You're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole there. There are a number that we have voluminous data that shows the criminalization of abortion increases abortion. It's not an opinion. It's a reality. It's hard scientific data that demonstrates a cause.
Man, maybe you should try to train these AI models, Jim. I've been trying to ask ChatGPT while we've been talking to give me your opinion, and it just, for example, I said, ChatGPT, unwanted pregnancies go up with abortion bans, and Chat says, the evidence does not show that abortion bans themselves increase the number of unintended pregnancies. So if this data is just so completely obvious, it's kind of weird that the most basic search function isn't returning these results that you say are out there.
Okay. It's lovely that you're talking to an AI while I'm trying to actually make my argument, but the reality is I'm happy to show you as much.
It was while Rylan was talking. Don't worry about it.
Okay. Great. So I'll start over. When you make this kind of a straw man argument that you just can't vote for a white supremacist even if their policies reduce white supremacy, you are pointing out again that the most important thing to you is not preventing abortion. The most important thing to you is criminalizing abortion. It is more important to you to have something on the books that says we don't like abortion than it is to actually prevent abortions. Now, I don't want to argue with ChatGPT, and I'm happy to provide you as much research as you would like to know with regard to the Mexico City policy. The 11% spike in the abortion rate since Roe versus Wade was overturned is not in dispute. It just gets kind of silly, because even if I were to prove that to you, you have already said that doesn't matter. It's more important to you that we have some kind of law on the books that says we just think abortion is terrible than it is to actually prevent the thing that you think is so terrible. That's the thing that frustrates me deeply with regard to the abortion discussion. Now, when you say, how much should we consider abortion when we go to vote, Luke has outlined, I think, kind of the rationale for a lot of Latter-day Saint voters, which is abortion should essentially overshadow everything else. Luke talked about the idea that, well, if there are some policies I like, even if there are, I just can't go there because the abortion, it's just too important, it's too morally egregious, and so therefore I have to vote even for Donald Trump who is the most morally repugnant man ever to hold elective office. But it's always bizarre to me when Republicans say, but his policies are just great, that fly in the face of everything you and I were taught it from primary on, because abortion is just so important. But it's not important enough to care whether or not the laws we pass are actually preventing it. All that's important, more important than anything else, is being able to give a big fiery speech and have something on the books that makes you feel good about yourself because you oppose abortion. I give no ground to anyone in my opposition to the moral evils of abortion. I think that we need to do everything in our power to rid ourselves of that moral evil. And if that means creating a legal environment where abortion is in fact legal, but abortion becomes unnecessary because we are then able to do the things that prevent it, then I am more than happy to do that. And I don't think any church member who thinks that they have to vote for all these other morally repugnant things, not just people, but things and policies, but they have to overlook that because abortion it's just too important to vote for these abortion laws. I think everybody needs to step back and look at what they are actually voting for and what the consequences of their vote actually are.
Luke, any thoughts? Let's get some last thoughts from both of you, if you have any. I just want to give you both kind of the chance to say anything else that might have come up in your mind or something you wanted to get out before we end here. So, Luke, any thoughts?
Yeah. So, once again, I'm with Dallin H. Oakes. Many laws permit or even promote abortion, but to us, this is a great evil. That's what the church has said on the legislative side of abortion, that laws that permit abortion are a great evil. There's no reason for Dallin H. Oakes to have brought up laws if he was simply trying to make a statement about abortion being evil.
Can you give me
the subject of that sentence is laws.
No, what's the sentence before it?
Okay, yeah, sure, I can get that for you. One cause of the diminishing birth rate is the practice of abortion. Worldwide, there are estimated to be more than 40 million abortions per year. Many laws permit or even promote abortion, but to us, this is a great evil.
Okay.
Other abuses of children that occur during pregnancy are the fetal impairments that result from mother's inadequate nutrition or drug use.
So, I think
so that's the whole paragraph.
Yeah, that whole paragraph is speaking about the great evil of abortion. To single out that sentence without the sentence before it and the sentence after it is to say that he was advocating some kind of legal remedy. But what he was saying is, regardless of laws that permit or promote abortion, abortion is a great evil. I don't think the antecedent to the pronoun there is the law. The antecedent is abortion.
What extra context was added that you think makes it so he wasn't saying that it's bad that laws permit abortion?
Because he's talking, he says before it, to us, this is a great evil. What is the great evil? Well, before it, he's talking about the number of abortions per year. After it, he talks about the consequences of abortion.
Mm-hmm.
The great evil he's talking about is that even if laws permit or promote abortion, that shouldn't change the fact that abortion is a great evil. I think that is the plain reading. And I think that when you divorce that sentence from its context, I think you are overstating President Oakes' advocacy for abortion laws. Now, I hate to do this because I'm giving you some ammunition, but President Oaks made much clearer statements in favor of laws for abortion earlier in his time as an apostle. But what I think is interesting in this is that you've reached back to 2012, and earlier in our discussion, I was quoting 2025 and Elder Anderson. The rhetoric that is happening now, in 2012, Roe versus Wade was still in place. Now, the environment has changed and the council has shifted, or the emphasis has shifted. And President Oaks seems more concerned about making sure people realize that because someone votes for a Democrat or a Democratic candidate, that does not mean they are not a good Latter-day Saint. And he's explicitly said we shouldn't just vote straight party. And he's called that a threat to democracy. And so you're going to lean on that and just say, I stand with President Oaks. I really feel convicted that I have nothing to apologize for with regard to where I stand, and that I feel I'm standing arm in arm with President Oaks on this as well. I give no moral ground to saying abortion is a great evil, and I think it's important to recognize that voting for different candidates of different parties is entirely acceptable. You have to vote Republican. So no, you don't. You really don't. And there are a number of other issues here, and you're not preventing abortion the way you think you are. So anyway, I've said way, way, way too much, and I think I've interrupted you way too much. So Luke, I will not say another word as you give your closing statement.
Abortion law is not going to save us. And laws permitting abortion aren't going to save us from the evil of abortion either. This is not a purely political solution. So of course, I'm not going to demand that of politics and politicians. This is a spiritual, a cultural, a societal issue. And politics is downstream of culture. And so I'm not putting one above the other. I'm asking for the politicians to do their job. And then I have participated, as I've mentioned before, in society doing its job. I am having kids. I am living out, the beauty of family and of supporting life and all that stuff. I have donated multiple times at a sacrifice, on a tight budget to pregnancy crisis centers that help women with education and supplies and all that kind of stuff. I have gone on various podcasts talking about not just the legal aspects, but more of the moral aspects to abortion. And so I'm participating in a fully well-rounded way. And that is what is going to help end the evil and scourge of abortion. And a political party who is wrapped around the idea that this needs to be, that it's completely fine, that it's not a moral question, that it's just between a woman and her doctor, that rhetoric, those lies that are unanimously supported by that political group are, well, and even like you're talking about, they need access to the resources, they need access to this and that. Part of the problem that we're having in society with the birth rate, and then abortion ties into that, is that there is this idea that you need to have it made, that you need to reach some sort of standard of income and all that, when people in the past were having much more kids on much less. And so people are being given these demoralizing messages of, well, no, if you can't afford a babysitter, then you can't have children. Probably should just abort it, is the subtext. God forbid we ask people to be circumspect in their sexual activity. That's never going to happen. That's never going to sell politically. And so abortion is the easy out. So I don't think it's a matter, the way that we're going to get out of abortion is allocating the proper government resources to giving women what they need. What's going to get us out of this is orienting ourselves, more towards the beauty of children, the beauty of life, the beauty of family, making abortion not unnecessary. That's not what we want to do. You can always make a materialistic argument for why it's inconvenient to have children. You can always do that, no matter how much stuff you give people and give them access to and all that stuff. We don't want to make abortion unnecessary. We want to make it unthinkable. That's what's going to decrease abortion. And that's what I'm advocating for. And a party that says that no, abortion's completely fine, you want to control women if you even express the idea that elective abortion should be an unthinkable thing. I think they're the problem.
Jim, any last things? I'll give you one more opportunity, man. Since you're at the computer with the screen on.
I've been sitting here talking to Chat GPT. Just to see.
Aren't we all, man?
Well, because Luke, your question was, do abortion bans prevent unwanted pregnancies or increase unwanted pregnancies? And I think that's one component here of it. The question I've been asking, ChatGPT says, yes, the abortion rate has spiked since Roe versus Wade was overturned. Yes, the Mexico City policy increases abortion by 40%. And I mean, so it's confirmed some of the data. But when I finally asked it here was, where is it?
Well, Luke, do you think the Mexico City policy is a good policy? Because one thing I think we should consider is that not all like laws are the same. And maybe you could argue that, well, that particular policy, whatever it is, doesn't work as well as it tends to be and should be adjusted. But I think that's a lot different policy. That's an executive policy, right? That's something that the executive office puts in by executive order. So it's a little bit different than law as well.
Yeah, and you can't conflate it into Republicans' abortion policy increases abortion by 40%. That's completely wrong. In fact, ChatGPT, when I asked it, on that more general note, who says abortion bans have increased abortion by 40%? It had no idea what I was talking about. That's just that very one specific narrow policy. There's no 40% increase over these other things. And in fact, for example, Cornell Jeb E. Brooks School of Public Policy found that prior to the overturning of Roe v. Wade, women in states that severely limit outlaw access to abortion were 13% more likely to have a live birth resulting from unwanted pregnancy. So abortion bans increase births from unwanted pregnancies. Another way of putting that
prior to the repeal
less women who don't want their babies.
You're saying this is prior?
That's when the study was conducted.
When was the study conducted?
Prior to the overturning, women in states that severely limit or outlaw access to abortion were 13% more likely to have a live birth. So, abortion bans, meaning a woman who has an unwanted baby is less likely to kill that baby in those places.
Okay.
So we can go back.
There's
back
certainly
and forth
a ton of nuance.
Although we've gone for a long time.
Yes, and
we've gone for a long time. We're past closing statements.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say anything. People can look up this stuff on their own.
Because it's interesting because people don't realize what Roe versus Wade was and what Roe versus Wade permitted and what it did not. Because if that study was conducted prior to the overturning of Roe versus Wade, then that study was conducted in states where abortion was readily available during the first trimester of pregnancy and with limited availability through the second trimester of pregnancy. It was legal under the Roe versus Wade framework to entirely criminalize abortion in the third trimester of pregnancy. And all of the late-term abortion sorts of legislation was entirely compatible with Roe versus Wade. So it's really important to recognize that we're dealing, and I'm guilty of this as well. we often talk in extremes when we should be dealing with gradations. And under Roe versus Wade, there were absolutely effective and positive bans on procedures that could just as easily have delivered a live baby, but wouldn't have because the mother didn't want to have a live baby. That just seems to me absolutely morally abhorrent. And there were bans in the country with regard to that in a number of states prior to Roe being overturned. The overturning of Roe versus Wade has allowed for criminalization to go so far and be so extreme that a Latter-day Saint woman who is seeing her health threatened is told by a physician, you will never be able to have a child again if you don't have an abortion. That Latter-day Saint, if she lives in Georgia, she would not be able to get an abortion because it's not life-threatening. And, if she lives in Texas and she has a condition that could become life-threatening, she has to wait until she's at death's door before she can get an abortion. So we're dealing with extremes here, and it's easy to deal with extremes. And I said to ChatGPT as we're going back and forth, because I was trying very hard to get it to agree with me, and it was agreeing with me to an extent, but I just finally said, I think there's a strong argument that making abortion unnecessary is the way to prevent abortion, not making it illegal. And ChatGPT said, yes. In fact, that's an argument that has been made by people across the political spectrum. Yes. The core argument is this: if the goal is to reduce abortions rather than simply prohibit them, the most effective strategy is to reduce the reasons women seek abortions. And that essentially is the message I've been trying to give here. I think abortion has distorted our national discourse in such a way that we don't speak about it. We don't really even talk about outcomes. It is such a heated political lightning rod that there doesn't seem to be any room for compromise. There doesn't seem to be any room for consensus. And that's not the way democracy works. That's not the way this functions. And it I think, has distorted the church in a way that people think that they are somehow morally superior because of a partisan position, and end up using that as a hermeneutic to not even think deeply at all about any sort of political ideology. I don't think if you were to sit down most Latter-day Saints and ask them, what is communism? They'd be able to give you a coherent answer. What is socialism? If Donald Trump rails on socialism and communism, and I say, you realize that Norway and Sweden are socialist countries. The UK is a democratic socialist country. Well, no. We just leap to these wild extremes and deal with these sort of political footballs without considering the broader context and the entirety of not just a political ideology, but of the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. And I think if the restored gospel of Jesus Christ is to you making sure that fire-breathing Republican abortion opponents get elected regardless of anything else, I think you've got a distorted vision, and I'm not accusing either one of you of that. But I do think that exists in the church. I think it's a problem in the church, and I want to push back against it.